a bird. It's a plane. It's
Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action. This is Mark Wade, writer of Superman Birthright, and you're listening to
the All Things Kryptonian podcast, including Superman and Supergirl.
We discuss games, movies, cartoons, TV shows, and comics.
Find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter.
All right. Hello. Let me get this image off of here. There we go. Hello. Hi. My name is Tyler Patrick. I'm the host of the Krypton Report podcast, and I am hosting today the podcast with Sean O'Connell, author of the Release the Snyder Cut book. Are you able to hear me, Sean? Make sure I'm coming in clear.
Loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Awesome. Just wanted to make sure. Busy day, so. All right. Yeah. Welcome, Sean. It's good to talk to you about your book and see how you've been doing. And I got to enjoy your podcast. I listened to the recent episode about The Conjuring 3. I'm a Conjuring film fan, and I was very interested with, I want to pronounce it correctly, Chavez?
Michael Chavez, yes.
Taking over as the director, because I'm a very big fan of Juan's. So I saw that you guys had talked to him, and I was dialed in. I was excited to hear that. So it was a good time.
Yeah, that's a tough gig to take over because Juan is such a master of horror. But obviously, he's shifting over to Aquaman and is buried in that world. So past the Conjuring baton.
I love that he's like, all right, I'm going to do this action movie. Then I'm going to go cleanse my palate, do this low budget horror movie. I'm going to do this action movie, and then back and forth. And, we won't, this is a whole tangent, but I was excited to just, see that you guys were interviewing Chavez. I think he's a very solid, good director. Mm-hmm. There's something about the way Juan does something that just plays on your non-expectations. He knows how to hold that suspense just a little bit longer where you think you're about to get to let go. And
right.
Then, so.
What he brought to, that one sequence with the trench in Aquaman that one sequence was so successful in terms of how he pulled it off that there was talk of doing a spin-off trench movie, because people just loved the way he handled that scene. So yeah, he's a totally gifted director.
Yes, he is. So Sean, welcome once again. I'm wearing my support for my Justice League, Snyder shirt. And I just got some questions I worked up here, but I thought we would just kind of chit chat. It's exciting that I like to type everything out so I don't forget. But that you work for Cinema Blend, which is a great website that I visit often. And then I hadn't put the two together yet. And I was like, it was like a light bulb came on. I was like, aha. So it was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that guy. All right.
I've been with Cinema Blend for, I think almost 8 years now at this point. Just starting off as a staff writer and working my way up to features and then their news director, and then all the way up to managing editor. So.
Well, congratulations. It's a great gig, and it's funny because I was a fan of your stuff until I realized that it was you. I was like, it was like the meeting of two different things. Like, oh, hey.
Good. So, that's better than the opposite. If you were like, who is this jerk?
Who am I talking to? Like, what?
This guy.
So here I got some questions for you. I saw on your profile, I was doing some research. You live in North Carolina?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. I lived in North Carolina for a while. I lived in King, which is right outside Winston-Salem. It's a little small town nestled between Mount Airy and Winston-Salem.
Okay.
And I worked near, near Charlotte kind of area, but I love North Carolina. It's great. So,
it's a beautiful place. I've called it home for over 20 years now at this point, and it's a weird little off the radar state in that, people might come here to vacation, but they head to the beaches or the mountains. But there's these quiet little pockets, Charlotte, the Research Triangle Park, which is the Raleigh-Durham area. It's very college driven. The college sports are huge down in this area. And the weather is just ideal. It's never too hot, never too cold. And so, we love it here.
So that leads me to ask, how is it living in North Carolina and then doing the job that you do, being in the Hollywood news and everything, and not being physically there?
That's a great question, because it is hard. It's a challenge to you have to almost establish yourself first or early on, because I'm in Charlotte and it's not considered a major market. And the closest thing to us would be Atlanta to the south, or even Washington, D.C. up to the north. And over the years, I've watched Charlotte kind of grow and become a bit of a player on the Hollywood radar. For a while, the North Carolina was a great place for filmmaking. People would use the backdrops because you had the beaches, you had the mountains, you could have city landscapes, you can cover a lot of different areas in states. But then we lost a lot of that filming to Georgia. So I was kind of positioned here to go cover like Hunger Games filmed here, Iron Man 3 filmed here, a lot of the Sparks movies filmed there.
I know that because see, that's what drove us to North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
I won't go into my whole story, but that's what brought us down there. And then a friend of ours, her sister's husband was from the location where they had filmed the Nicholas Sparks movie, Safe Haven.
Oh yeah, okay.
So we had went out there, checked it out. And wasn't the first Conjuring filmed in North Carolina?
I got to go to that set actually and watch them film.
And I remember that when Kevin Smith was down there for Tusk, because that's right as we had moved down there, and I was like, "Hey, that's funny."
But so what it requires is a lot of travel. I'm up in New York or out in Los Angeles a lot prior to everything shutting down. Obviously,
obviously
changed now since this point, and that's made it a little bit easier, is because everything's virtual now. Like, I mean, look at us being able to host this convention right now and be guests with each other. So the industry is shifting in that direction. But prior to it did require a lot of travel to go to where the things were happening. And so now I'm able to sort of do it from this office.
It's exciting. And it's also nice to just be at home and do your thing. Like, we're in the process of moving, so I had to create this nice backdrop of.
I like it.
Thank you. My wife designed it for me. So shout out to Jania there for that.
Very cool.
So what I wanted to ask you also is, I see that you play guitar and drums in a band. I see your guitar back there. My next question is, do you need a bass player?
Yeah.
Always. Right now. If I tell my wife, hey, I'm going to go play bass with Sean, who I interviewed in North Carolina, she'll be like, oh, North Carolina, let's go.
The hardest part about keeping a band together is finding somebody who can play bass. There's plenty of drummers and there's plenty of guitarists, but no one wants to play bass. And yet it's the backbone of any sort of band and songwriting. So yes, we do. To answer your question.
Bass is the weirdest instrument to me. And I say that as a bass player because you either blend into the drums where people don't notice you're there, or you blend into the guitar, or both, and people don't notice you're there. But then when you drop out, they notice.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
It's like they don't realize they're hearing you until you're gone.
Yeah.
And
I've played in several bands where the bass player is either really, really good, and it carries the root of the music so that the drummers and the guitarists can explore a little bit better. And then I've had other bands where the bass player isn't doing much of anything. And you feel like you're working twice as hard, because in your head, you probably know this, you can hear it a certain way, right? And it needs to sound full, and once that piece is missing, you overcompensate, to make up for it. And it's only when you step back and you say like, oh, that's because the bassist isn't doing enough stuff.
See, we're all over the place today, people.
How long have you been playing?
Oh man, I started in '95 with upright.
Okay.
And then I went on to electric, took a break, started in high school, and then after high school I was in bands. And I think right now is the longest stretch I haven't gone with actually playing, because it becomes playing every now and then because, I'm home with the kids and work. And then, all my friends are doing their things, and it's like finding people who want to play, and also find people who want to play and have that same creative mind of what you want from your sound.
Sure.
That's the hardest part I found, is some people have that very, like, this is what I want. Some people have that open, like, let's bring our collective ideas together. And that really gets to be the hardest part of making music, is just finding people with a similar taste. And the older you get, when you're younger, you can be plugged in and your social life is different. It's easier. But as the older you get, it's like, man.
Well, and to that end, like I I played bass in one band in college, only because they had an established setup and they were friends of mine. And I said, okay, I'll play bass. And I had so much fun with it. It's actually a lot of fun, especially if you're a guitarist. It's kind of that mindset, but you play it a little bit. You go differently through the songs. And lately, I've been thinking to myself, like, I should just pick it up again too, because it would be much easier to find a group of people who are playing together and maybe just plug myself in. So I'm thinking about it.
It's so neat, like the mindset when you're a guitar player who plays bass.
Yeah,
where you come from compared to a person who just plays bass. And that's why I feel like bass is so interesting, because you have variant styles and everything. Mm. And like I said, I remember I played this one show and they were very much like a heavy band where the bass was very much just thumping.
Yeah.
And I personally like to hear my notes to be loud, but like hear my notes, hear my sound. So yeah. We could probably keep going about this, but I just thought that was a cool fact. And I was like, maybe he needs a bass player. Everybody needs a bass player.
Sure.
So we're here to talk about, you had wrote a book called Release the Snyder Cut, which thankfully has occurred. I noticed, I was looking at the release date. It had come out in March, shortly before the film had come out. And what I want to know is, were you a fan of Zach's before the writing of the book?
I was, but not nearly as much as I have become since dedicating my amount of time to it. And what I've come to realize, the thing that I really liked Zach's films, but I had issues with his DC films specifically. I loved Watchmen. I loved 300. I wasn't crazy about Sucker Punch.
I think that's a studio metal thing. We won't get into that whole, but
yeah,
I've read enough that what was released was, cut down and altered compared to what his vision was.
I had a lot of issues with Man of Steel, and then I liked BVS. I liked the direction it was going, but but the thing that really tipped me back into Zach's column, essentially in terms of what he was trying to do with DC, was the Ultimate Edition of Batman versus Superman, and the way that it filled in the cracks and the way that it expanded on, like when I watched the theatrical cut, I felt like this feels truncated, right? Like it feels like we're racing through a lot of different things, and there were certain things in it that just didn't make sense.
It's tight. It was very tight. Like nothing had a chance to breathe. It was like here, go.
Yes, so. Right. And when you get Lex, driving the bus essentially through a lot of the things that happen over the course of the film, and that motivation gets filled out more, and you get amazing scenes of Clark like investigating. You
get Clark. You actually get Clark.
Yes. So that's when I kind of opened my eyes more to like, oh, there's a lot more going on in Zach's DC films specifically. And so I kept going back and rewatching. And I've come to really appreciate Man of Steel. It doesn't mean that I've overlooked some of the issues that I've had with it. There's a couple of key things that, like, still when they happen, I'm like,
is it the one where he jumps between the tanker as the tanker hits the building and blows up? Because that's like one of mine that I'm just like, you could have just stopped the tanker, man. You didn't have to do the cool slide between, because now like the tanker blows up and like keep building. I'm like,
That is no. My biggest thing is Jonathan telling him it would be okay to let people die. I can't get past that. Like I'm always going to have an issue with that, and it's just I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I understand it. I completely understand why Zach is doing that in there. I don't agree with it, but that's okay. Like you're allowed to do that. So
yeah. So that brings my next question is, which film would you say is your favorite film of Zach's?
Oh, of his DC films or in general?
Overall, in general.
It's probably Ultimate Edition of BVS. That is such an ambitious film. And when you look at all that it accomplishes, it's really fantastic. I love right from the get-go how it figured out a really clever way to put Bruce into the end of Man of Steel and show you that this is how a very distrusting character like Batman would be extremely wary of an alien creature who had the ability to potentially wipe us out. Like, that's a great motivation for moving Batman through this world or introducing him into this universe. And, that's a hard thing to do. And I know that people at the time wanted to see like a Batman Superman team up movie. And Zach just chose like, no, I'm going to come up with a story where they are antagonists, but give you a legitimate reason why they're antagonists. And it wasn't until Ultimate Edition really laid out how and why they were being worked against each other, by Luthor, that I was like, oh, this is really, really great. And that's the one where I go back and rewatch that multiple times. So I think that's got to be the one.
I really appreciated the introducing Batman older. I like that we jump ahead in his career so that if we want to, at the time, we won't go down any rabbit holes, but at the time, like having an older established Batman. So if we wanted to throw in Robin, Batgirl, Nightwing, anything, we could then, be in the sandbox with those. We didn't have to do this film introduces this person, this film introduces this person. So I liked, and personally, that was, before it was even announced or anything, a friend of mine were just chit-chatting about how would you bring Batman back, or would you do another Batman film? And I said, if I did, I would jump his story ahead. I wouldn't start from the beginning. And I appreciated that as far as...
And yet, what does it open with? The murder of the parents.
I think it's like if you're directing Batman, you're like, I have to put my stamp on it. Like, I feel like that's every director, because even Schumacher tried to put it in there when he did Batman Forever.
Yep.
So it's like every director's like, I have to put my spin on the murder. And I'm like, okay. But at least it wasn't a whole long, drawn out scene,
Yes. Yeah.
So with that, sorry. What is your favorite character from the Justice League in the character period and then in the films?
My favorite is Flash, because I really love that story of him getting into sort of criminal analysis, criminal investigation in order to prove what had happened to his mother. I think that's a terrific story. I love the element of Reverse Flash. I think he's a terrific antagonist. Batman's obviously got the best rogues gallery. No one's going to question that. But I kind of dig Flash's his enemies. They're kind of cheeky. They're a little bit campy. But I really like Reverse Flash a lot. And if I'm going back to DC and reading through, I'm addicted to DC Universe. I love the fact that you can just dive into the digital catalog and pour through just archives and archives of books. I find myself most recently reading a ton of The Flash, Shazam, and a ton of Nightwing. And then I'll dip back into Batman and Superman runs, sort of classic Batman and Superman runs. But I love Flash. I often say that Flash is my favorite character in the Justice League movie too, especially in Snyder Cut, because I feel like Ezra finally got a chance to explore some elements of him. But I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what he gets to do in a solo movie, and really become the centerpiece of the film. So for that reason, I think my favorite film in the Justice League movie is Ben Affleck's Batman. I just think he's such a terrific interpretation of both Bruce Wayne and Batman. I love the way that he takes charge in the conflict at the end of the movie, the Russian battle, and sort of acts as the decoy, to get all the parademons chasing after the League. I love the fact that just like in a situation where he's a human in this conflict of gods and aliens, and he's the bravest guy who's diving right through it. So I think my favorite character in the Justice League film right now is Bruce, but that's changed. That keeps changing from week to week. So,
and I understand that, like, the one character going into the Justice League period, the films, that I was most like about was Cyborg. Mm-hmm. But then getting to actually see Cyborg's story played out, I was like, man, I am a fan of this character in this film. Like, this really is like the character that I came into with the least interest in, but left like, wow.
And it's crazy how much it got changed in theatrical cut. Like, there's so much great backstory and so much emotional hook to his motivation that gets restored. Him going into the mother box and, seeing what his life could have been had he avoided the accident that changed his trajectory is really heartbreaking.
Like, I've watched it with my kids, of course I watched it first to just make sure. And like, there's a lot in there, and it's interesting the stuff they pick up on. And you were talking about, like, with Batman, and he'll ask me, like, why is Batman like this? Or why is Batman this? And I'm like, you got to think about it. Batman's human, and all these people are alien or super powered, and he's just a guy in armor, with his gadgets, and he's the leader, he's the brains, he's trying to, position everybody, what to do. And my son's like, yeah, he's 6. So he's like, I got it now. Like,
Yeah.
So what got you interested in writing the book? Like, what was that spark where you're just like, okay, I got to do this. Like, this has to be told. This has to be cleared up. This has to be told, because we know that there was a whole social campaign. There was rumors. I followed Man of Steel, BVS, and Justice League ridiculous to where, I had copies of all the trailers, every little promo snippet, like the AT&T when they did little like advertisements, and like I had noticed footage in those that weren't in the theatrical film, and with just watching enough movies and thinking and having read enough about what the movie was to be, I could see little parts like, okay, that's a reshoot. That is a reshoot. That is different. And then, so when was that point for you where you were like, I have to say something?
Well, it really was happening over the course of everything that you just discussed, which is seeing this play out over the course of Zach stepping away from the film, Zach getting replaced by Joss Whedon, the fact that theatrical came out and was as bad as it was. Like, all of these elements were always really interesting to me. But just the way that you described that now really speaks to why I wanted to put this story on paper, is because I know that there's a fan base. It doesn't really matter what your fandom is, whether it's Star Wars or Marvel or Star Trek. Like, there are people who are so passionate about certain material that they are going to, as you say, collect every trailer, and analyze every piece of footage. And a Justice League movie is extremely, extremely important to them. You can see people who are watching over my shoulder, like, I'm a Marvel kid, and I loved the act of seeing the Avengers get together. And when I stepped back and thought about how, if you're a DC fan, if you're a fanatic of these characters and you love them and you've loved them your entire lives, and this is your opportunity to see them in live action, paired up for the very first time, and what you get is that theatrical cut, that the studio decided this is good enough, just take this and be happy with it. It's such an insult, it's really a slap in the face at people who have supported these films and have invested in these characters. And I wanted to sort of document that disrespect, because I think that it's unique to the film community. Quite often, filmmakers are really trying hard to deliver something that fans would enjoy. So as I started to really piece together all of the things that had gone wrong, I realized that there's a much bigger story going on here, that could potentially propel a book. And then the next step to it was, my wife was the one who sort of said, like, okay, the film element of it is really interesting, and I get why you're interested in all of that, but she's like, I'm way more interested in the human element of the movement and the people who are spending all their time on social media and pushing the hashtag and raising money for AFSP. And once I started to figure out that whole side of it, I was like, oh, there's a great story here. And truly, I mean, the reason I'm in film journalism in the first place, the reason why I love movies as much as I do, is because I just love stories. I'm a story junkie, and this is a terrific story from no matter what element you take it from, whether it's Zach's side or the Hollywood side or the fan side, like, all of it's compelling. And so as long as you can get to the heart of what makes it interesting, I figured it would be a pretty good book.
And you're talking about, putting together the book. One of the questions I thought about would how, you have, of course, being with Cinema Blend, the ability to talk to more legitimate sources, but how are you able to kind of navigate to understand what was real, what was studio puff, what was just fiction and rumors, so that you could tell the most clear story and understanding of what occurred?
Yeah, it's hard because you have to put a lot of faith and trust into. I try not to follow up with too many people because there's plenty of people in the movement who live anonymously, and who weigh in and contribute behind screen names that you don't necessarily know who they are. But that's what journalism is. Journalism is constantly backing up your sources, checking and double checking and making sure that the story that you keep hearing from the same people gels. And you have to remember that a lot of time when I was doing the research for this book and trying to get the story on record, the people I was speaking to and getting to go on record, they didn't think while I was interviewing that the cut was going to come. This was all being done months before HBO Max had agreed to do it. So these were people who were still very invested in getting the message about, hey, we want to see the Snyder Cut come out. But I will say that there were a lot of people who were working behind the scenes on the Snyder Cut movement who didn't want to have their names attached to the work that they were doing because they honestly believed, and it took weeks, if not months, of convincing them that, hey, this is in your best interest. They didn't want to pull any focus away from the fight to get Zack's movie restored. They never wanted to make it about themselves. And so that lent an air of, I think I can trust where these people are coming from because they're not in it for themselves. They're not trying to make it about themselves. They're keeping their eye focused on the prize of getting the Snyder Cut of Justice League restored. But of course, everything that I picked up, like you said, being at Cinema Blend gives you access to other people who are in positions of power who can either verify or shoot down or point you in another direction. There's a lot of elements where you get told something and you go to verify it and it kicks you up to the next level, and then you pursue another sort of avenue, and all that just takes time. But that's part of the journalism process.
One thing with the whole Snyder Cut, and I say this as I'll say this as a person, even if you're not a fan, the idea that somebody worked on a piece of art, worked on a film, worked on a story, dedicated time, and then that was completely altered and changed, and what was given was of such a lower caliber. Just from that point, I would be like, well, the artist deserves at least to have his vision seen as best as possible. That was one thing from the whole, the Snyder Cut thing was, even if you're not a fan, just step back and look at all the images and all these scenes and things that have been released that weren't in that film and just think that there's something wrong here. That what you're given doesn't feel, it doesn't feel, first of all, the movie didn't feel like the way Zack would direct. I'm very surprised. In my head canon, I just refer to it as an Alan Smithy film.
Yes.
And I'm very surprised that hasn't gotten. I'm surprised that Zack's name was even attached as directed by on it. Just and how the rules and all that work with. Is it? You can definitely see a lot of scenes that are reshoot, but definitely retooled. Scenes in the theatrical, and I would have pushed please remove my name from that film. Well,
and there are a couple of elements throughout the course of the story of the Snyder Cut that had one or two things happened, I'm not quite sure that the fans would have fought quite as hard to get it released. One I think absolutely is Zack's most loyal fans were furious that his name was on that horrible cut. And if it were Whedon's movie, if it was credited as Whedon's movie, I'm not sure that they would have been as upset. It was like an insult to the fact that it was Zack's movie. Mm-hmm. The other element of it too that is that the theatrical cut ended up being as bad as it is. It's as sloppy and poorly thought out and really just slapped together as it is. Because I always make the argument too that if theatrical cut of Justice League came out and it was okay, not great, but passable, then I think 50% of the people who were in the Snyder Cut fight would have been like, all right, it wasn't Zack's vision, but it wasn't terrible. And they would have just moved on to the next Aquaman, Wonder Woman 1984. They would have just kept going with the DC universe, you know? But it's because it was as horrible as it was that it compelled the people to go back and take a look at the earlier trailers and say, like, am I not going crazy? Like, was I not promised something that at least looks decent? You know, like by that point, Zack had the San Diego Comic-Con trailer, which is 2.5 hours, 2.5 minutes long. Another longer trailer that had been put out. There was plenty of, and stuff that he had been sharing on social media too. He'd been sort of ramping up the fan base using Vero. So there was plenty of evidence that at least suggested, like, we're going to get something epic. And then instead what you got was like a flat piece of nothing. So I always found that to be pretty fascinating as well.
And I mean, you know, thinking about what you just said, like, yeah, if the movie had come out and been more like okay, like it's not exactly what we were hoping for, but it's not bad. Like I enjoy it, you know, but having the knowledge of just what it was supposed to be, where the character was supposed to go, the horrible Henry Cavill mutated face thing, you just felt like for the characters, like, you know, when you think comic book and heroes, Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man are probably the three biggest.
Yeah.
Okay. And you see how the two biggest are in this movie that even if you don't like Snyder's vision, you know, but having a complete actual vision and not something hoked together is better for just an experience. Because then you say, okay, I don't like that compared to this, like, what is this? It's you know, the two biggest characters are in this thing where you're like, this doesn't feel right.
Right.
It's like, and like you said, this is the pantheon of the DC Comics characters, you know, and this is their first live action film together. We should be excited that we're seeing this. And then what we get is just subpar. And I mean, if it had been like for example, I really like the Shazam movie. Mm-hmm. Okay. But if like you had gotten the kind of quality you got from Justice League in a Shazam movie, you'd be like, okay, it's a Shazam movie.
Yeah.
You know, he's like a second tier, you know, not as big, and your expectations for that aren't as large. But when you go in like The Flash, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and then you walk out like, because even from a story beat, when the theatrical movie ends, it feels like that's your midpoint of a movie.
Yes.
It feels like, okay, like we're about to go into the third act, but it's like, this is done.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it definitely doesn't help that there are two chapters before it that set a tone, right? You know, that establish what this world can be, and then you step back. Like if this was the first movie in a franchise, you'd be like think about like the way that the Fantastic Four tried to get launched, you know, and came across as like a kid sort of movie. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the Shazam movie, like that's a pretty good, accurate representation of a character who is a kid, you know, who then gets blown up to superhero proportions. Like, I understand why you keep that tone. But the comparison I kind of make to it is, you mentioned Spider-Man as being as huge as he is. Like, by the time they got to Mark Webb's second Spider-Man movie, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, there was a lot of studio meddling going on in that case. And there is a very small push to get the web cut, you know, of that movie out there.
I would love to see that.
I would too. But by that point, we'd already gotten 4 Spider-Man movies, right? Mm-hmm. So the fans aren't as furious because they're like, well, I've got a bunch of other Spider-Man movies. Like, you don't have other Justice League movies. That was your Justice League movie. And people couldn't get past that. And I don't blame them. I wouldn't either. Yeah,
it's because you get another film of all those characters. You know, it's not, like I said, just one character, especially where it's like Batman or Spider-Man. You're like, give it a few years, they'll reboot it.
Yeah.
You know,
it's kind of stunning that there's not a Justice League movie on the radar at DC. Like, how are they not planning at least another version of the Justice League? That's your bread and butter. That should be your crowning jewel.
What my headcanon, like, because I have this, I want everything to kind of work, and where, you know, fans and people have kind of picked apart, like, well, this doesn't work. What I've done in my headcanon, okay, roll with me here.
Okay, I'm ready.
So here's how it goes. Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, BVS, Suicide Squad, Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Okay.
Those 5, Crisis. Because Ezra Miller was in the Crisis movie, or the TV event, it connected it. Then you have now the post-Crisis DC movies, which would be the Justice League, because Warner Brothers wants that to be canon, Aquaman, Birds of Prey, Shazam, Wonder Woman 84, The Suicide Squad. That's how my headcanon explains the tonal changes and any story inconsistencies that don't line up with what was done before. Like, that's how I view everything, is I throw Crisis in there. And that's why Wonder Woman in 84 feels like a little bit of a different Wonder Woman than we've seen in her first standalone film.
She does, yeah, very true.
Post-Crisis. So
I like it.
That's just how I've made it. So I feel like, okay, when I watch these movies, I'm like, I'm not like, why is this different? Why? I'm like, post-crisis.
Okay. I like it. That's the first time I've heard that. That's a pretty good approach.
I have to make things work because, or I'll, you end up in those nerd geek conversations of, well, in this movie they established this, but in this one I'm like, yeah, you're right, but it can be looked at. So I'm just like, post-crisis.
But they want their cake and eat it too. They want to be able to do a Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie and not have it connect to anything. They want to be able to do Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson without having to connect to anything. It's hard to do cinematic universe and also do those sort of Elseworld projects.
I mean, I don't need everything to like connect where I have to have everyone appear in every film, but just that idea that the worlds are connected is a nice feeling, that we could see them together. We could see these characters. I'm excited for the Batman, but at the same time, like, it's sad that foreseeable future, we're not seeing these characters again and getting to see how all of them together would become, like the really well done team that we want for the Justice League.
Yep. Or even just Henry Cavill showing up in Black Adam.
Yeah. And him getting a chance to just put his capper. My wife explained when we watched Man of Steel was, you have a film, Man of Steel is very much a Kal-El type film. Mm-hmm. She's like, Clark is trying to figure himself out as who Clark is. Superman's trying to figure himself out who Superman is. And then we get to BVS, and we don't really get a chance to explore Clark through interactions with other people as much, because most of the people he interacted with was like Perry and Lois.
Right.
And when he's with Lois, he's just himself. And then even Superman, we don't get to see a lot of interactions with other people as far as like talking to them or anything like that, other than just maybe a quick comment here or there. And I feel like, having that third film to really like who this character is, getting, him to the character's journey as he's embraced who he is. One of the biggest things for me was in Zack Snyder's Justice League when he comes out in the suit and, he flies off to help them, that's his character accepting who he is. Mm-hmm. He in Man of Steel, he was very much pushed to come and reveal himself because of Zod. This is now like being brought back as his second chance. He could have stayed dormant and done nothing, but he chose once again to don his alien heritage, to stand as Superman, and to go out there. And I feel like that's when he knew who he was, and not getting a film that lets him tell that story,
right,
is heartbreaking.
It is. I know it's lost potential. That was always going to be something difficult when I talked to a lot of people in the Snyder Cut movement as we were leading up to the potential of that movie's release. And I kind of asked them, like, how do you guys feel about the fact that if you get the Snyder Cut, that might be it, that the studio is going to give you the movie that you've been asking them to see, but it might not lead to anything else. And for the most part, everyone was like, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I just want to see Zack's vision for a Snyder Cut, for a Justice League movie. But it's really hard now after seeing it to not say what you just said exactly, which is now I wish they got a chance to continue. So,
continue in some form where we got, Henry Superman getting a good send off, a good kind of closure. Like it doesn't, we've heard about what Zach's visions for number 2 and number 3 were. Even if I didn't get that, just something more. Because I would have loved to have seen Superman fight Darkseid.
Yeah. Yes. It would have been terrific.
And then we're not getting that, New Gods movie, supposedly because of the Snyder Cut killed the New Gods movie. Yeah.
I wasn't sure Ava was the right choice for that movie anyway.
I never had the feeling that was going to happen anyways.
Mm-hmm. Well, Warner Brothers really does like to announce projects without 100% being sure about whether they're going to come to fruition or not. They throw a couple things at the wall, see if it sticks. It's a little bit unfair to fans. It's a little bit unfair because it gets fans' expectations kind of hyped. But
yeah, especially for characters that don't have any other representation. One being the Nightwing film.
Oh,
that was supposed to be. And then
I spoke to Chris McKay about that. Chris McKay's got a movie coming out called The Tomorrow War with Chris Pratt. And I interviewed him for that and asked him, I kind of brought it up in the way that hey man, I love Nightwing and I lament the fact that that's become a lost DC movie, that we've sort of chalked it up to the not going to happen pile. And he was like, no, don't do that just yet because I think it might still happen. So he's keeping hope alive a little bit for it. And he's sort of pointing at the idea that DC's branching off into a multiverse concept and maybe a Nightwing movie can exist in that. Maybe that's true. Or maybe it becomes an HBO Max type, original project that's developed for HBO Max and the budget is a little bit more scaled down. The advent of streaming services is keeping all of this stuff really, really interesting because it can go in a lot of different ways if they want to open up and explore it like that.
Exactly. And the streaming platform of HBO Max gives these stories to be told. It brings people to their product. They have the Batgirl film and the Blue Beetle that have been announced to be HBO Max. So that's exciting. The other thing I was going to ask you was, I can't even remember. We're all over the place so much. And I'm like, I know we only have so much time, so I don't want to open too many rabbit holes for us to follow down. But I wanted to point out, I was looking, so I have here, I'm going to put in the notes the Amazon link where people can go and get your book to really understand this whole story, this whole journey that, because a lot of people didn't understand, it's just an alternate cut or it's no. I think the best representation I saw someone put was, it wasn't a altered film; it was a deleted film, and I thought that was really, really strong because there's so much that's different, and even the things that are similar are still different. But when I was on Amazon and I was looking, I saw some other things that were listed under your author's page. Did you want to talk about any of those things, or?
Oh, that's a different author.
That's what I wondered. And I was looking through it and I couldn't tell for sure, but I was like, you know what? I'll just throw that out there to him because
they're
very much different
books.
Yeah. I was like, it feels very different, but it's under his name. So I'll just kind of ask him if he wants to talk about it. Okay. If not, then
good question. No,
I will just pretend like it didn't happen.
And I've tried to get Amazon to separate because I'm sure that guy doesn't want me associated with his philosophical books either. But, yes. No, those are not mine. But I am working on a second book as we speak, and it's dedicated to, it's funny you bring up Spider-Man. Spider-Man is my all-time favorite character. And this is going to trace his sort of journey through Hollywood and the ups and downs that have come with the Raimi films and how they came to a halt and Mark Webb's trip through and then the passing of the baton to Marvel and Sony trying to cooperate together. So I'm going to explore all of that in another book that's probably going to hit bookstores in 2022 if all things go according to plan. So,
well, that would be fascinating because just, the canon film, the James Cameron, stories of how that came, and then the changes that occur just in the filmmaking process. My kids are big Spider-Man fans, and we were talking about, I told my wife, I used to have a production photo from the first Raimi film where he had the actual web shooter.
Oh, really? Okay. Nice.
It was the scene where he's in his room and he had the actual web shooter. And then of course, when the film came out, he had the organic.
Right.
And I'm like, it's, it's really interesting, those little stories that you can pick and choose and learn about. And Spider-Man has just as much history in a more, feels like, condensed period of time than, say, Superman and some of the other characters
Absolutely
do.
And a lot of the people who worked on those Raimi films, I got a chance to interview John Dykstra, who was really figuring out the visual language, like of how to move Spider-Man through. And John Dykstra worked on A New Hope. Like he got an Oscar win for doing the original Star Wars. Like he's as pioneer gets. And here he is trying to apply, how do I bring a character like Spider-Man off of the page and into live action in a way that looks credible, that it's not just a wonky cartoon type character. So some really fascinating stories I'm getting.
I always thought that Spider-Man was a great character, and I always felt like it was as if someone looked at, and I mean, this can be true or not. It's just, it feels like they took Jimmy Olsen and Superman and was like, put him together. Like if I'm going to make my DC comparison, I was like, because he has a lot of those same aspirations of both those characters. Spider-Man is my favorite Marvel character. If, I had to pick out a favorite. And so I would look forward to reading that book, just to see, because
it's coming your way.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be great, because one of my favorite books, I'm blanking on the author, and I totally forgot until we were talking, was called the $1 Billion Batman. I read it about 8 years ago. It was just about, similar to what you're talking about, Batman's journey and Bob Kane's history and Bill Finger's history and who did what happened, and then the financial success of Batman as a brand, and how Bob Kane profited and what he did to how he would hire other people as like ghostwriters and artists to do Batman's stuff, but he would then take the credit or all that. It was a very fascinating story and book. I had bought it digitally, like it was about 8 years ago, and read. So it'd be an interesting read for you sometime if you ever feel like it.
I'll definitely jot that down. Yeah, I'll definitely jot it down.
So coming back around, we appreciate the work of the people who, took the time out to push for Zach's film. We appreciate people of note and credit, much like yourself, being involved in, creating this book to tell the story, because when you were working on this book, you had no idea the film was coming.
No.
You were creating this book, and it just happened to work out that your book was released shortly before the film. But if it hadn't been released, this was a way to say, hey, there's so much going on around this film. What's true, what's not? Look, this is what I've done from a integrity, from a journalism. I'm not just some, blogger out there posting, hey, Warner Brothers, love Zach. You're like, I've done the homework. I've done the research. This is the story. And, it's appreciated from fans, and even, general audience who maybe not read the book will just being able to be like, okay, there's legitimacy to what this whole Snyder Cut push was. There's a story here. I mean, a lot of people have compared it to the Donner cut of Superman 2.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Which took 25 years to happen. People don't realize how long, and not that fans were pushing for that, but like every once in a while that topic would come up, and they'd be like, well, there's a longer cut, or Richard Donner filmed a lot of footage when he was doing the first Superman movie, and then almost casual audience would be like, oh, I didn't even know that. I didn't realize that there was a different thing. No, you're right. I just wanted, even without knowing whether the Snyder Cut was coming, there was enough really cool stuff happening in the movement, and there was enough drama associated with what had happened to Zach and what had happened to the theatrical cut that I wanted it documented, and so that somewhere down the line, if and when the movie came out, that people would be able to point back at this book and sort of say like, oh, this is what had happened back then, and these are the people who really gave of their time and their resources to get this version of it released. But I'm telling you, I still cannot believe, I can't wrap my brain around the fact that with a month before I had to turn the manuscript into the publishers, Zach goes on Vero, and announces that it's coming. And then my publisher's saying like, okay, we can give you an extra month, we can push your deadline back. go get all the quotes you need to finalize this. And then because what people don't realize is that the book has to get turned in, a good 8 months before it actually hits shelves, because it goes through an entire editing process. There are copywriters and editors who are fact checking everything that you're putting in the book. They don't just take it and publish it,
Thanks, man. Print.
Yeah. There's layout issues, there's cover issues, there's all this stuff that has to happen. So I knew that it was coming in 2021, the book, at some point, and they had been telling me first quarter, that's where, and then COVID happens, and literally disrupts every link of the publishing chain, from people having to work remotely that aren't used to working remotely, and the publishers figuring out that aspect of it, to just how you get the book. I have people in the UK who have been patiently waiting for this book to get there. And the way to get books overseas has completely slowed down, and they've been pushing back the release date on that. So you're aiming at a target, and the target's constantly moving, and yet somehow the book still lands, 2 weeks before the movie hits HBO Max. Like, that's impossible to me, and I will never understand how lucky I was to have the timing of that sync up the way that it did.
I mean, it's great because, it works out because, when your book lands, it's really the hot topic. If people are talking about, people are like, and then people who don't know what is going on, it's a quick reference guide to, well, this is the story about this. Oh, okay. I can read this. I can go through it. It's funny. You were talking about like the UK. I learned, I wasn't sure if it would work, but I was able to actually purchase my 4K Blu-ray of the Snyder Cut from Amazon UK.
Yeah, sure. I've heard it's available there early.
Yeah, because I have friends in the UK who are posting things about it, and they had never made an announcement for physical release here in the States.
Yep, still haven't.
And, part of me feels like they won't, because that's part of that HBO Max brand where they want people to go to, or they'll wait a year or two down the road to do it. And I'm still I like having my physical media.
Mm-hmm.
You never know. Storm comes, internet issues, whatever. I can watch it, but also we were talking about this. My wife and I were about, digital files, they can alter and change, and then that's it. Yeah. You can't. But having that printed, like, this is same with like a book, like, this is printed. I have it. I'll go lock it in a vault, because I've waited, this movie I heard about, I was looking, 2016, they started filming.
Yep.
I looked at my
Blu-ray. Did it arrive? It's there? Okay, yep. Good. Very nice.
It's packed with everything else, as we're trying to move, but I have it.
Yeah. All right, good to know.
I look at my son, I'm like, when you were 1 year old, your sister wasn't born yet, we watched the trailer for this movie. And it's been in my mind, and like, I mean, the whole, current DC thing is just crazy, that Man of Steel came out, BVS was announced, and by the time that BVS came out, my son had been born and was 1 year old. Right. Just how much everything had been talked about, that now I'm like, the movie that I was promised in 2016, I now have finally, and I have my kids, and they've grown up.
Imagine if you had to wait 25 years, like the Donner fans did. Like, it would have been insane to get the Snyder Cut 25 years from now.
I mean, but it took Superman Returns to bring the Donner Cut, and it's crazy because I feel like we never had. You didn't have the means like this, like hashtags and everything like that, to really push that, and no one thought in that mindset of alternate cuts or a director's, and that's just something that's built up over time with DVD, VHS, now digital streaming, where it's possible. Sure.
The advent of streaming, I've said that I don't think the Snyder Cut would have arrived nearly as quickly as it had if not for streaming.
Or maybe not at all.
Yeah.
Just because of, like, it might have been just a physical release or something, just because of the legalities of hoops and about releases, and we won't go down that rabbit hole, but we're all grateful for the digital release, at least.
Absolutely.
Sean, I want to thank you for coming on and talking with us today. I know that, you're busy. Everybody's busy. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and share your journey and chit chat about music with me here.
My bass player. Of course, Tyler. Thank you for having me, man. Really great interview. Good questions.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I want everyone to check out Sean's podcast if you want to give a quick plug for it.
Sure. It is called the Real Blend Podcast. It's REEL. It is dedicated to all things entertainment. Obviously, we go over film, and we've been dipping into some television streaming. We're weekly. We come out. Well, we don't have a specific date that we come out because we record all over the place. But one of the things that we do is we interview directors. Directors who do sort of these press junkets don't really love the quick sort of 4-minute interviews that the stars have perfected, and so we give them a long form 20 to 30 minute segment to go in depth into their films, and we've had some really great guests over the years. So go back and check out the Real Blend Podcast wherever you get your podcast needs met. We have a YouTube channel that people can go and subscribe to, and you can get a video element to a lot of the interviews that we have. And then Cinema Blend is always doing some type of superhero comic book and mainstream entertainment coverage, so make sure you follow us on Cinema Blend as well too.
And, that's how I learned more about you. Just, like I said, putting the two together and realizing, same person.
Yeah, that's that guy.
So I appreciate it. Thank you. We have a quick promo coming up here for what you'll see later for today. Also for the Actors Fund. And if you're not familiar with the Actors Fund, we have a promo for that so that people understand that not everyone in the entertainment industry makes a ton of money. There are, actors who don't make a lot of money or don't have the resources that normal jobs provide. That the Actors Fund helps, people in all positions, from your best boys, your grips, and everything with times like we just went through with COVID. So if you would like to check that out and see what that's about, we appreciate that. We're trying to raise some money and awareness just to help those people out, in this time. And once again, Sean, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you. And I think, Kelly, you got it pulling up now here for our ad. And
this convention is also a fundraiser for the Actors Fund. The Actors Fund fosters stability and resiliency and provides a safety net for performing arts and entertainment professionals over their lifespan. You can support the Actors Fund by following the link below and donating. Every donation also enters you into our sweepstakes and gives you a chance to win these fantastic prizes.
This is Dan Jurgens, and if you want to have a good time, keep listening to the Krypton Report.
Hello, everybody. I just want to let you know that Southgate Media Group has its own Patreon. That's right. For $5 a month, you can get exclusive shows, content, and interviews with the different podcasters of the network. This Week in Geek is a Patreon exclusive only series. So check it out. Go www.patreon.com/Southgate Media Group. We are always adding new content. If you want to help out this show and any other show on Southgate Media Group and you really don't have the extra money to do so, check this out. Go to southgatemediagroup.com. At the top, there's a link to Amazon. Click that, log into your Amazon, shop and buy like normal, and part of the money that you spend comes back to us to help us with our podcasts. If you're like me and you love listening to different podcasts about Superman, I have a few that I want you to check out. Some of my favorites are The Last Sons of Krypton. Connor and Ray are always reviewing different books, and it's really nice and refreshing to kind of dig back into older stuff. The Aspiring Kryptonian, Tasman and her team are always finding interesting people to interview. Digging for Kryptonite has become one of my favorite ones to listen to, as Anthony digs into different eras of the character. There's always the Always Hold On to Smallville, which I've guested on before, if you're wanting to step back into that nostalgia realm. So check out all these, and there are many, many more. So check out our Twitter, because we're constantly finding new podcasts that inspire and bring hope to everyone around. The Krypton Report is part of the Southgate Media Group network of podcasts. If you have an interest, check out Southgate Media Group to see if your podcast is there. I bet it is. At the Southgate Media Group website, you can sign up for our newsletter. You'll get info on all the shows, and you can find what you want. You'll also find links to our sponsors where you can get great products and support the podcast. Also, our book, Pod Life. Podcasting Stories. It's a great book. Check it out. It's nice to hear where people come from and why they do what they do. And remember,
Let's